So today we were invited to talk about personal protection for home visitors and maintenance staff. Zion and I work with Stop Pests in Housing, which is a project funded through an interagency agreement between HUD and the USDA. Zion is with Penn State IPM through Penn State University. Pennsylvania IPM program, sorry, through Penn State University, and I'm at the Northeastern IPM Center at Cornell University. We hold trainings, and part of our grant project is to provide free technical assistance and training on pests to subsidized housing sites. We are going to go through some slides and then take questions at the end. There is a chat box if you can find it. You can find it probably by scrolling over your top or your bottom of your screen. But as we just learned, you can unmute yourself too. If you can access your controls, you can unmute when we have a chance to for questions. Okay. So today I'm going to do a quick introduction, just review what bed bugs look like, what are the signs of bed bugs, how do we get bed bugs, and how we can protect ourselves. Diane is going to cover inspecting and monitoring for bed bugs and what are the treatment options. It's really good to know what the treatment options are because you want to take a proactive role in whether your home is being treated or your workplace is being treated. You want to know what the tools are, so it's best to be informed as much as possible. Diane and I are also going to use the terms PMP or PCO, and you might not be familiar with those terms, but we're using them instead of the word exterminator because exterminator kind of has the feeling or the connotation that we're going to come in, this person's going to come in with a spray pack and kill everything. But pest problems are a little more complicated, and we feel using the term pest management professional or pest control operator is applies better to the situations that we work in. Okay. So this was a Diane slide, and I thought it was really important to mention that we may mention product names, but we're not endorsing them. We're using them as examples. You may see pictures of products. We cannot endorse a product, but it's inevitable that there's going to be product names mentioned. We try to only medical concerns must be addressed by a medical professional. We can't answer any bed bug bite questions. And do not take legal action based on this presentation. Consult a lawyer. Our information is from peer-reviewed literature. That's research-based information. It might be different than some of the things you've heard. There's a lot of ways to kill bed bugs out there, but we try to give you the best information from other universities and researchers and our own personal experience. And we try to update that information regularly. So let's get into it. What is a bed bug? It's a blood-sucking insect, I think we all know. They can range in size from when they first hatch out, they're like a poppy seed or sesame. They grow into a sesame seed size, and they eventually, as adults, they could be as big as an apple seed. But you can see them if you have good vision. The nymphs, which are the babies, are often very clear when they hatch out from the eggs, especially if they haven't had a blood meal yet. So they look very different, and I'll show you some pictures. And so even fed and unfed, they look like different bugs to a lot of people. So it's important to know what they look like after they've had a blood meal and when they haven't eaten in a little while. That in the unfed picture, you can see there's a little black spot. They keep a little reservoir of food for, and that's how they survive for a really long time without food. Females can lay up or less than 200 eggs in a lifetime, maybe up to 300, but 200 is a good guess. They lay about 1 to 5 eggs per day. They wander around laying those eggs here and there. They don't lay them in a clump. We tend to see a lot of eggs around aggregation sites where a bunch of them are, but they can also just wander around and drop an egg here, drop an egg there, and that's how they disperse, and that's what something that makes them very difficult to control and how they spread. Takes about 5 weeks to 4 months for egg to hatch and become an adult. And each one of those life stages, they shed their skin, but to go from one life stage to the next, they need a blood meal. So if we can stop them from getting a blood meal, they won't keep maturing to sexually mature adults. They molt 5 times and they feed before each molt. There's a nice picture of bedbugs mating in the left-hand corner, and we call that traumatic insemination. I mention it because it is one theory on why females tend to wander. So the male inseminates the female anywhere in her abdomen. They poke a hole in the abdomen, so it's a traumatic injury. So this might be the reason why we see females going away from aggregation sites. Once they've been mated, they're fine. They're set for life. They can lay eggs for the rest of their lives. They have an incentive to not be mated again because it's an injury to their body. So that might be another reason why we see them very difficult to control, because the females will wander off and lay those eggs. They're most active at night, but they certainly will adjust to the behavior of their host. If you work at night and sleep during the day, the bed bugs become active during the day. They hide in cracks and crevices. They like nice close spaces. In entomology, we call it thigmotactic, that meaning they like a surface to be touching the top and the bottom of them. They're most comfortable in these cracks and crevices, another reason why they're hard to control. They can't fly, they can't jump, they can't burrow into your skin, they simply crawl. They can crawl pretty fast. I've seen them kind of hustle when they need to, but they do just crawl. The biggest way they get around is hitchhiking on coats, bags, furniture, and wheelchairs. We always say in integrated pest management, the first step is properly identifying your pest. You want to know what you're dealing with. And my previous job, I got in all sorts of insect samples, and the insect sample that is most often mistaken for a bed bug is that carpet beetle that's on the right-hand side of the screen. There's several different types of carpet beetles, but this one I think looks most similar to the bed bug, and they kind of leave these little black droppings that can be also confused with bed bugs, and they live in carpets and upholstered furniture, so you can understand why they might be confused. But certainly bites could be flea bites or mosquito bites. We can't diagnose based on bites. Cockroach nymphs, you're going to often find cockroach nymphs in the same situations. Diane's got a good picture that shows you cockroach nymphs in a bed bug trap, so they can often be together. And then there's several other bugs. There's bat bugs and swallow bugs that look a lot like bed bugs, and they will bite you too, but the control measures are very different. But most often in our situations, we're going to see that anything that comes in looking like a bed bug is likely a bed bug. So what do we look for? We look for bites is often the first warning that there's a situation. You might feel the bites first. You might not react to the bites. Then we see fecal spotting. That's the droppings of the bed bugs. They look like someone dotted your upholstery or your sheets with a Sharpie marker. Shed skins. Remember I said they shed their skin 5 times in their life, so they leave a lot of those shed skins around, and you might see the shed skins more often than an actual live bug. You often see dead bed bugs from previous treatments or because they've just died. And then we sometimes see live bugs, but we often see those other signs before we see the live bugs because they're so good at hiding. Here's a couple pictures of what they commonly look like in the real world. They'll nestle into these cracks and crevices in mattresses. And here they've gotten into a hole in a mattress, and this is where what we often see with an aggregation where there's a bunch of nymphs or babies all together. Okay, bites you cannot confirm an infestation by bites alone. Many people have no reaction, and there's several other pests that do cause bites. Most often when I go into an apartment and I come back out itching, it's because of fleas, because fleas will go after their host immediately. Bed bugs, you have to be sitting still for a while for them to approach. So if you're itchy right after you leave an apartment, it's a good chance that that's actually fleas. So we have to confirm a bed bug infestation with live bugs. a couple other things about the bites. They do prefer to feed during darkness. They often are in a row on our arms, and they used to say breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but that's actually where our arm probably, or our body part, hit the surface of the bed, and the bed bugs are walking along the bed, and that just happens to be where they first encounter their host. And very often the bites are painless, and often your reaction grows to the bed bug. So first you may have no reaction, then a little reaction, then it gets worse and worse and worse. Kind of like I'm sensitized to it. Some people never react. The fecal spots are the droppings. They're different than cockroach poop. If you really want to get intimate with your bug poop, cockroach frass is gritty and has a texture to it. Bed bug poop is just liquid, and if you wiped it with an alcohol or a Clorox wipe, it would kind of smear a little bit more like blood. And you can't confirm a current infestation with fecal spots alone because it could be left over from a previous infestation that it's actually been treated and eliminated, but it is this is one of the signs you should look for. Oh, there's another picture. So you can see the shed skins, close up of the shed skins. This picture also shows you where they most like to hide in that mattress piping. And here's some pictures Dion shared with me from Loose Orkin in New York City. And Dion pointed out to me the last time we did this presentation that those on the bottom are eggs, and you can see that they're the size of the threads in the mattress. So they're pretty small, and you have to get used to looking for them to be able to spot them. And anything else, Dion, on this?
Well, on the bottom left, you can see the bed bug feeding and making room for that dinner by pooping out the last meal. That little ball there is digested blood, and that's what causes the staining that you see in the photo on the right, bottom right.
So how do they spread? They actively crawl along wires, pipes, under doors, conduit. They can come in on passively on anything that we're bringing into our homes, backpacks from traveling, or suitcases, our laundry, if we take it to a laundromat that has a bed bug infestation. But in our world, a lot of times they come in on used furniture or from people picking up discarded furniture. This picture on the left said what's on the other side of the wall. That means just to be aware that if one apartment has bed bugs, then the neighboring apartments should be inspected. What I would like to reassure you with, though, is in our situations when we're going into apartments that have bed bugs and we accidentally bring home a hitchhiker, that an introduction is not an infestation. Same thing in your office. If you have one bed bug that crawls on you while you're in a home with bed bugs and then crawls off of you when you get home or to your office, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have an infestation. And the faster you find that and the faster you act, the better. But for just to explain an introduction versus an infestation, we have these bed bugs that they travel around. So we might find one bed bug, a pioneer, a bug that has just taken off on its own accord to find its another host, or a hitchhiker that you picked up going into an infested home or place. But it would have to be a pregnant female. So one single male bug or a non-sexually mature nymph that you bring home cannot cause an infestation. It has to be multiple bugs, including a female and a male, sexually mature female and males, or a pregnant female. So for an infestation, a colony has to establish itself and start breeding. They have to find harborage. They have to find a host, because remember, they can't mature without a host and a blood meal. They have to be able to lay eggs, hatch out. Those tiny baby first instars have to be able to feed and survive, and they're very delicate, and sometimes they just dry out or something else happens to them before they even have their first meal and they need to make it to maturity. They have to go through those 5 cycles. So they have to have 5 meals before for them to become a sexually mature adult. And once you have a breeding colony, then you have an infestation, and much easier to handle early on. So this is a good example. This bug on the left is a female. I made a little guide for you. This is kind of important. If you just see a single bug, you can look at it and probably pretty easily tell if it's mature, whether it's a male or a female. The females have a rounded bottom, the males have kind of a pointed bottom. So the one that I took a picture of on the left is a female, and that could very well cause an infestation if she had already been mated with. Here's another one, another example. This is a nymph. If you found that nymph crawling on you or in your office or in your home, you flush it, you squish it, or you actually wrap it in tape or put it in a baggie for identification. But you wouldn't likely, if that was the only bug in your home, it would not cause an infestation. So I think I mentioned this already. This is a little bit of a repeat, but how do we get bed bugs? Hitchhikers use furniture, use clothing, cracks and crevices, visitors and visiting. And then most relevant to you guys is if you're sitting for 30 minutes or more on infested furniture. It can happen in less time. Maybe I should say 20 minutes or more, but you definitely have to be sitting down for a long time for the bed bugs to feel comfortable approaching you. But there are always exceptions to the rule. Have very hungry bed bugs in a very infested situation that will approach you a lot faster. The other precautions you should take are when you're moving furniture or working, just doing regular maintenance work in heavily infested homes. Those are the two most concerning places where you could be picking them up in your jobs. So most people, when they see a bed bug, they just want to bust out the spray and kill it, but we're gonna let Diane tell us what the best ways to kill bed bugs are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about prevention, because never getting the bed bugs to begin with is a much better option than getting them right. So when Diane and I talk about integrated pest management, we talk about several pests, not just bed bugs, but we always start with trying to limit the food, water, and shelter of a bug, and that can prevent an infestation. If a bug has no food, water, or shelter, they cannot survive and they cannot form an infestation. Can we eliminate the food, water, and shelter for bed bugs? And since you're all muted, I'm going to answer for you. The answer is we are their food. They don't drink water, they just drink blood, and our homes are their shelter. So we can't eliminate those things for bed bugs. In fact, they just made their home on that stool. But we can take precautions at home. Anybody who is exposed to bed bugs in their regular jobs should think about doing the following things at home, at least the following things at home. I have a mattress encasement on my box spring and my mattress because I don't want to throw those out. I want to save those, and the mattress encasement can save those, the box spring and the mattress, from getting an infestation, and it makes it easier to spot those little spots if you did God forbid, have an infestation. I also have monitors at home that will tell me if I was exposed, that those monitors are placed in a way that they will catch the bed bugs, and Diane's going to cover that. And then occasionally I'll take a flashlight and I'll just walk around my bed and do a quick inspection. Flashlight's really important, again, because they're small and they're hard to see. So how do we not bring them home? We know if you know you've been exposed, it's a little easier to go through these things. The hard part is if you don't know you've been exposed. So you have to pick and choose what regimen is right for you. But very often when I'm in a crowd and I know that there's pest control technicians there, I always ask, have you ever brought them home? And generally, almost always the answer is no, because everybody has their own process and their own routine of taking precautions to not bring them home. And they could be several of the following options I'm going to give you. The most important would be to inspect yourself when you leave an apartment. And the cuffs in your shoes, any kind of folds, my sleeve cuffs or pockets even, and shoes are the most common places we would pick them up. You want to take your any clothing you wore into an infested apartment that you're worried about that may have picked up some bed bugs. You want to either take that off before you go home, if possible, throw it in a dryer at your workplace, or just have your change of clothes in a sealed bag and change before you go home. Or if you have to wear your clothes home, I usually try to go right into the bathroom and change my clothes in the bathtub. So if anything fell out, I would be able to see it and it could be washed away. And they have trouble walking up smooth surfaces, so bathtub might be a good option to trap any. Then I take my clothes, I put them in a plastic bag. I don't even carry them through the house. I take them in a plastic bag. Double plastic bag is better. Put it right in the wash. You could even just put it in the dryer for 30 minutes on high. Even dry clean only items dryer for 30 minutes on high. And you don't want to overfill your dryer because this method is really reliant on the heat circulating through the clothing. You should clean and vacuum your car regularly. I should take this words of advice for myself. But the idea there is that if your car is clutter-free, control is going to be a little bit easier, and vacuuming alone can take care of bed bugs if you're discarding the contents of the vacuum. And then the other thing I do is I try to keep my work stuff in a tote. So if I get home late at night from a trip or something and I'm not sure, I don't have time to inspect my bags, I'm tired, I have a clear plastic tote like the one pictured on the bottom left, and I keep my stuff in that tote until I can do a good job of inspecting or laundering. Or you may have your work stuff that just stays in your plastic tote all the time if you know you're going to be using that for work on a daily basis. Oh, and I put the lint rollers in there too. I don't know if I mentioned the lint rollers are a really good inspection tool too. You can inspect your furniture. You can also inspect your clothes with an extra sticky lint roller. So I'm going backwards. So I guess I should have done this. This should have been before the previous slide. But if you know you're going into an infestation situation, and you will be exposed to bed bugs, there's a couple things you can do. You can use an insect repellent, and I would only advise this if you are going into a situation where you know that there are bed bugs or you suspect there are bed bugs. It's not we're not recommending that you just spray yourself down with insect repellent every day. Diane also brought up when we did this presentation last Friday that there are no repellents that you can spray on your furniture besides one he'll talk about. You cannot spray like your can of off on your chair and expect it to do anything. There's nothing that a bed bug won't walk across. How off is helpful to us or heat is helpful to us is that it will be, if we're in a situation where we're temporarily in an apartment, it will deter them from crawling onto us. DEET has to be reapplied every 3 to 4 hours, as well as Picaridin-based repellents. You can use a citronella-based repellent. I just read a study that if you are into all-natural insect repellents, you can use them. The trick is they just have to be applied more frequently, like every hour. So if you're working all day, like as a maintenance tech, and in several apartments, maybe you want to have that kind of off around. Have a coworker inspect you, or inspect yourself. Flashlight, lint roller, again, I mentioned that already. And then if you suspect an item has bed bugs on it, you can find it in your tote. And you want to have a bed bug containment kit, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But before I go anywhere, I hear often that people spray themselves with rubbing alcohol before going into apartments, and I want to mention that it's completely useless. Once it evaporates, it does nothing. It's not a repellent. And when we spray it to kill bed bugs, you practically have to drown the bed bug with rubbing alcohol. You may think you've killed them. It may knock them down for a little while, but then a little bit later they get up and they walk away. So it's not a reliable treatment option. If nothing else is around, you're probably going to use it, but I'm going to let Diane talk a little bit more about that. But as far as a personal protection, it's useless. So a bed bug containment kit is something you might want to have in your office or your workshop, or hopefully not your home, because we've prevented them from coming into the home. But a bed bug containment kit could just be, you're prepared, you see a bed bug, there's no panic, we know what to do. We've got a plastic box or even a Ziploc bag, wet wipes we can quickly grab them with, plastic bags to contain things that we need to contain in office situations or home visitor situations. If you are carrying around paperwork, and that you get paperwork from your clients, Ziploc bags, plastic totes, all those things are really helpful. And a roll of clear tape helps us catch the bed bug. So you can take a piece of tape, put it on top of the bed bug, fold the tape over, and it's completely contained in the tape, and then you have a sample that you can get identified by a professional. Optional items you might want to consider putting in your containment kit: flashlight, narrow-bladed spatula. Diane talked about last time, a half a credit card actually works too. That's for scraping things, like to get a bed bug off of them. They cling on to the surfaces really well with their little claws, so sometimes they have to be scraped off things. Disposable gloves. Again, bed bugs, I forget this, and you should always wear latex gloves or some sort of glove when you're exposed to bed bugs, because they do have body fluids in them, and that is a concern. So disposable gloves in any situation where you can be exposed to bed bugs. A stool or a folding chair is something that if you're a home visitor, you might want to think about purchasing. You're bringing your own stool in to meet clients or with the residents, so you don't have to sit on their furniture, and meet in the kitchen if you can, because that's the least likely room to have an infestation. I have seen bed bugs in kitchens, so there's always exceptions. Always have a bag for your personal items that you think might have been exposed. You can have a change of clothes, and booties and coveralls are for the people that are going into apartments. Sometimes you just need the booties, because in general, if you're not sitting down, bed bugs are going to climb up from your feet and hitchhike on you by your feet. So booties can also help you from transferring bed bugs from home to home. Coveralls we recommend for when you're really doing maintenance work and you're moving infested furniture. You want to have an extra layer of clothing that gets taken off before you go home, and perhaps even dryer or washed and dried at your work site. Okay. So when you're in an infested home, again, avoid sitting on that upholstered furniture, meet in the kitchen, wear a protective layer. Diane told me a trick he's done is he carries a newspaper with him, and he sits on that newspaper, and when he leaves, he just walks away without that newspaper. I got to put that in. And I think I mentioned all this except the furniture bags. If you are moving furniture, I think most people in maintenance and that work in housing know this already. You should be wrapping your furniture before you dispose of it and carry it through hallways where it could be dropping bugs and spreading them. You always want to wrap furniture before it's discarded, and of course destroy it and mark it somehow. We're finding that even writing bed bugs on furniture might not do the trick. You should really dismantle it and destroy it as much as possible to prevent somebody else from picking it up. Okay, so I think I have a repeat slide, and I don't need to mention these things again, but one thing I didn't mention in previous slides is don't transport items from one home to another. If you're a home visitor, if you're doing home visits all day, try not to transport items that might be infested. Vacuum sharing is a big no-no these days, and using a tote, plastic tote, again, to carry your stuff in. I want to point out that the University of Minnesota has this resource on their Let's Beat the Bug page. It's a bed bug guidelines for social service providers who conduct home visits. It talks about a lot of the things that I've just mentioned, but it goes into a little more detail. So I recommend, if you are a home visitor, to check that resource out.
Susanna?
Yes.
So University of Minnesota website also has multilingual resources. So if you have residents who speak Somali or Ethiopian or other languages, you may check the University of Minnesota website that you just had up a minute ago as a place to look for those.
That's a great point. They have a lot of bedbug resources, and the translated posters and brochures are really helpful. Okay. When you're working with residents, the key messages, or residents or clients, depending on what you do, the key messages you want people in multifamily housing to understand is they have to be responsible for inspecting. Elderly and disabled people, vision impaired people, cannot see the bed bugs, so somebody has to be inspecting for them. And we really, in our bed bug trainings, we really promote proactive inspections by housing staff or by the pest control company. We want the residents or your clients to report to their property manager or landlord if they suspect they have bed bugs, so somebody can get in there as early as possible. The earlier we treat, the easier it is to control bed bugs. The longer we wait, the harder it is and the more expensive it's going to be to control the bed bug infestation. Don't want them to self-treat. Spraying Raid or other over-the-counter or even essential oil products scatters the bed bugs, first of all, and makes them harder to find, harder for the professional to find, and not to mention resistance, which Diane's going to cover. So we don't want them to self-treat for several reasons, and Diane will get into that a little more. We don't want them to throw out furniture on their own. They don't have, you know, the furniture, the big furniture bags, and they will spread bed bugs throughout the hallways and to neighbors if they're carrying infested items. And then they just put items by the dumpster. They don't destroy them, so somebody else can pick them up. We want them to, of course, do laundry and regularly and vacuum. Those are more difficult in some situations. If you have clients or residents that cannot do those tasks or won't do those tasks, then one-on-one intervention is going to be needed. The New York State IPM program has these picture-based fact sheets that you see on the right-hand side. This one is step 3, vacuum here, there, and everywhere. So they go through with pictures the steps that you can take, that your clients and residents can take that are non-chemical controls that really do make a difference. So you can find them on our website or on the New York State IPM website as well, or just contact me if you need copies of those. We always encourage that you are open and you talk about bed bugs so people feel more comfortable with the idea of bed bugs and with reporting bed bugs, which is what we really want them to do. So classes or having posters and brochures often help people understand that this is a normal occurrence in multifamily housing, and that, or in any housing, this is not something to be ashamed of, and can also give the impression to the residents of a housing site that management is being proactive. And that can go a long way to preventing lawsuits. So if they feel the management is taking care of them, they will be less likely to complain and cause legal problems. And then I mentioned one-on-one intervention. There's sometimes needed in the whole class. So don't throw furniture away. If it can be treated, it should be treated. We defer to the professional to determine what is treatable and what's not treatable. Also, I want to mention bed bugs have no problem with metal furniture, bed frames, so tossing things out and replacing isn't going to solve the problem. Their bugs are going to just come out from their other hiding places and infest a metal frame bed. And this is a meme I got off of Facebook. It says, "I got this mattress off the street," said no New Yorker everywhere. No New Yorker ever. It says, "No bugs, just don't need a second bed anymore." So I thought that was funny. Our message is, don't pick that furniture up, which New Yorkers seem to have got. Have an official plan or policy in your office. Have a response plan, have a monitoring plan. If there's exposure and you're coming back to an office, you want You want to have monitors in place. You want to inspect your home and your office for bed bugs on a regular schedule. Otherwise, you'll forget. Have just a regular planned inspection by a professional or by staff, and have a treatment plan, have an education plan, and document everything. Don't allow self-treatment. Documentation is really important. If you, from time a bed bug is spotted to elimination, we want all that recorded in our workplaces so we can be sure we've got the records that we need. If you find a bed bug, or one of your clients or residents finds a bed bug, we want to save the insect like in the tape or a pill bottle, or double bag it. We want to report the problem to whomever we need to report the problem to. If it's in your own home, if you rent, to your landlord, or take care of it yourself. Don't apply pesticides or move things around too much. That scatters the bed bugs. We want the professional to get a good view of where the bed bugs are, and control is going to be a lot easier if we're not moving furniture around and doing a whole lot of prep work ahead of time. And then we want to be conscious that we're not carrying bed bugs from place to place. So be careful about your own habits, and have a pest management professional inspect the home that you think bed bugs are in, and the adjacent units in your own home. If you find them, inspect the surrounding rooms, and have a professional inspect. Okay, so I'm going to give Dion the controls here, and he's going to pick up with how to inspect
good afternoon.
and
I am
monitor.
Dion Lerman. I do work
I'm
for the
going to
Pennsylvania
keep my hand away
Integrated
from the
Pest
mouse.
Management Program.
Okay, Dion.
I am a licensed pesticide applicator in Pennsylvania and something called an associate certified entomologist. And I've been working on this project for about 10 years now. Oh, that did work. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. And I'm sure this is not news for you, but in terms of where bed bugs live, it's with us. There are not wild bed bugs out in the park. They live strictly in our homes, and mostly in our homes, and sometimes in other places that we live in. They are very tiny, and their preferred harborage, that is the space that they like to hang out in, is only a 1/16 of an inch thick. That is the width of a credit card, if you can see my little image up there. And so any place where you can slide a credit card, such as on the bottom right behind the switch plate, or on the left, you can see why those mattress pipings are so attractive to a bed bug, because they can actually get into that space between the mattress and the piping. But any place where you can slide a bed bug is a place where, or slide a credit card is a place where you should be looking for bed bugs, especially near where people are resting. And that's a critical thing. It's not just beds. It's probably the living room couch in front of the television. It's probably recliner chairs, because people spend a lot of time in recliner chairs. And if people are in wheelchairs or other medical assistive devices, they're probably in those devices as well. So what are we looking for? We're going to look for live bugs, for eggs, for fecal spotting, and cast skins. So in the middle there, we've already seen that picture. Actually, I guess we saw all these. But on the right, you can see the eggs, and you can see they're only 1 millimeter long, which is 1/26 of an inch. And they're about the width of the threads in that mattress cover. So an individual egg looks like a little piece of white thread that somebody's been clipping. And if you find them, oftentimes you'll see masses of them, such as you have here. And that's really the first time when you'll recognize them. Once you see them and recognize that that's an egg, they're a lot easier to spot. The shed skins down on the left are important because sometimes females will lay eggs in them, or younger nymphs will hide in them, and that provides shelter both from treatment. It's also, so that's another good reason why you want to vacuum all that stuff up. The other one is so that you can then see in the future if there's ongoing activity. If you clean up all that shed skin mess and come back next week and there's more, you know that there's still bed bugs going around. And on the bottom right, of course, we have the fecal staining, which is often euphemistically called rust marks. And if you're not sure, you can hit it with an alcohol prep pad and you'll get a nice reddish brown color because what that is blood. But it is staining. It's like a Sharpie stain. It's not a particle like fly dirt or cockroach dirt. So I mentioned power wheelchairs. If people are in power chairs, they're probably spending most of their time in that chair because it's more comfortable and it's their mobility. And in many cases, people will sleep in their chairs because transfers are so difficult. And in that case, their chairs will become infested. And that means their chair becomes a distribution mechanism as they drive around the building or the community. In this case, I would treat that simply by starting by vacuuming it out completely. And I might use another pesticide in there if I have to. I want to be very careful to try to make sure I got all the eggs. And I would use another product that I will talk about at the end called Apprehend. So sticky traps, I should say, you want to be very careful using steam on power chairs because it, of course, is water. And if you're not careful, you can short out some of the electronics, which is extremely expensive. You don't want to do that. So that's why I'm not recommending the use of steam. Typically, wheelchair companies use Sterifab, which is basically alcohol with a small amount of a pesticide and a small amount of a disinfectant. But if you're using that, you still need to make sure you physically remove the bugs and especially their eggs. So sticky traps are not very useful with bed bugs. Studies have shown that bed bugs don't like them, they avoid them, and in fact will go out of their way to avoid getting stuck on them. The exception to that is the low line, which is illustrated on the left side of that photograph. This is a fold-up sticky trap designed to go under appliances, and it works for bed bugs because the outside of it is all cardboard, and then when they get inside, that's when they get stuck. So it's similar to an interceptor that way. But I would not recommend extensive use of sticky traps for bed bugs. They just have not been shown to be valuable. And any tool that uses sticky traps is really not an effective one. What is effective are interceptors. The first and most widely used is a brand called Climb Up. And you can see it's very simple. It looks like a dog dish, basically. The outside of the dish is roughened, making it easy for the bugs to climb. They climb as part of their host-seeking behavior. They're climbing, looking for somebody to feed on. And so they climb up on the outside, and then they get stuck on the inside, and they can't get out. So these are photos from Dr. Chang Luen at Rutgers. You can see on the left how it looks installed under the bed legs. And when he came back 2 weeks later, there were a lot of bugs in there. And I can tell you, here we go, that's close up. You can see nice bed bugs, adult bed bugs there, both male and female. And then a lot of cockroach nymphs, as well as a couple of bed bug nymphs in the back. And that's pretty common. A lot of places have cockroaches, and a lot of places have bed bugs. So bed bugs are attracted to us by three things. The most important is the carbon dioxide that we exhale. They can recognize our body heat when they're very close to us. Basically, once they get up on the bed, and they will then zero in on us very quickly based on our body heat. The other thing, however, that's drawing them to us from a distance are what entomologists call pheromones and what the rest of us call BO. And specifically, odors on clothes are probably, on dirty clothes, are probably one of the reasons why travelers bring bed bugs home with them from hotels is that the bed bugs are attracted to the odors from the worn clothing that's in the luggage. So if you're traveling, we would recommend having an extra large Ziploc with you to keep your worn clothes in. They're attracted to each other primarily through the use of pheromones, which are chemicals that insects use to communicate with each other. And there are lots of different kinds of pheromones that are used by different insects. The one that's most important for us with bed bugs is what's called the aggregation pheromone. The aggregations are big clusters of bed bugs that we frequently find, for instance, on the edges of mattresses, right on those binding. Every 8 to 12 inches, there'll be a big clump of bed bugs, both adults and nymphs and eggs and dead skins all living together. And what happens is in their feces, they excrete this aggregation pheromone, which then causes other bed bugs to come in and join the party, basically. So once you get an aggregation going, it becomes quite active. We use these pheromones in ways that I'll show you in just a minute. So these are passive monitors. There is no attractant here. The idea is they're supposed to provide artificial harborage that the bed bugs are going to move into and make them easy to find. The reality is they're not as attractive as real harborage, and why would a bed bug bother with this? So for instance, these here are designed to be slid in between the mattress and the box spring, but bed bugs show little interest in them. They'd rather be in the mattress or in the box spring, not in the cardboard harborage. Active monitors, on the other hand, have something that attracts the bug to them. So most commonly, that's either with carbon dioxide, with heat, or with a pheromone lure, or some combination of those. So on the right is something called a night watch carbon dioxide trap, and this is these are expensive. You can rent them from pest control companies, but the problem with active monitors is that bed bugs can tell the difference between a machine and a person. And so these do not work well in occupied spaces. They work very well in unoccupied. So they're good for determining whether an unoccupied unit is bed bug free after turnover, but before move-in, for instance. They are good for determining if bed bugs may be active in an office if you leave them in over a weekend or overnight. So down on the bottom of this slide, you see another picture of something called the Sensei active volcano. The volcano is a plastic trap. It's about 2 inches square with slopey sides and a big hole in the top. And it works just the same as the other interceptors in that the bug crawls up the sides to see what's up there, falls into the trap, and can't get out. And these are effective both as a passive monitor, or here, as you see in this slide, there is a active lure that has been inserted in there, that thing that with the printing on it, that contains the aggregation pheromone, and it attracts the bugs to it. And as you can see, the bugs have been attracted to it. And in fact, studies have shown that these are very effective. They're also nice, they're unobtrusive, and can be easily slid under desks or in the corners of cubicles or in the corners of waiting rooms or similar areas to monitor on a continuous basis for the bugs. To use them, all you have to do is look in them and see, is there anything inside? No? Good. Yes? Oops. The answer is yes. You need to immediately move into your pest control, your bed bug protocol. So canine scent detection is very popular, and it can be effective in large offices especially, or other large areas like movie theaters or retail areas where the bugs could be just about anywhere, and physical inspection is pretty overwhelming. Trained dogs are fast and they can cover large areas quickly. Everybody likes the idea of the dogs and they like the idea of you being proactive and bringing the dogs through. The problem with the dogs is that they're variable and results are vary enormously. Even an excellent, well-trained, well-handled dog has bad days. Not all dogs are as well-trained. Not all handlers are that good. And there's been some issues with quality control with the dogs. If you are using a dog and the dog alerts, you then need to get visual confirmation. You need to look for a bug and find a bug or an egg. Otherwise, you cannot rely on a dog alert alone. Multi-dog systems where you have more than one dog, so that it's confirming the alerts of the first dog, are good quality control there. We would also prefer for dogs not to be handled by the pest control company, because pest control company, quite frankly, wants to sell its services, and we want a neutral party looking for the bugs. And dogs can be very expensive. And in fact, a lot of research has shown that the interceptors, such as the climb-up that I showed you, are much more effective than the dogs. Climb-up interceptors have been shown to detect between 95 and 98% of all infestations, whereas the dogs are not nearly that good. However, in a large situation, large apartment building or office building, bringing a dog through periodically once, twice a year can be viewed as proactive, and it's very good for public relations, even if it may not be quite so good for finding the bugs. If you want more information about dogs, you can contact the National Entomology Scent Detection Canine Association, and their website is down there on the bottom right. Okay, so we're going to look at the bug's impact on human health and insecticidal resistance, and then what our early detection and treatment protocols are. So the problem with pesticides is that we need to have effective pesticides in most treatments to get rid of the bugs. But we have to be careful because pesticides have human health effects, especially to children. And the reality is that, in fact, because, bed bugs have become resistant to many of the chemicals that are being used against them. 85 to 95% of bugs display resistance to pyrethroids, which are the main, most common class of pesticides in use today. That's what's in the over-the-counter pesticides, and it's also in most of the professional products that are still being used as well. And because of that, results with chemicals can be disappointing. It's also important to realize that the eggs of bed bugs are extremely resistant to chemicals. Whereas you may be able to kill nymphs and adults fairly easily with the chemical, even though you may douse the eggs with that same chemical, the eggs will continue to hatch and viable nymphs will come out of those eggs. And this is a problem, because the eggs will hatch 6 to 10 days after being laid. And so you may come through, do what you consider to be an effective treatment, where you're wiping out the live bugs that you can see, and you hose down areas where you see the eggs, but unfortunately those eggs will continue to hatch. And it's really important to realize that spraying is not a substitute for thorough inspection. And if you call a pest control company and say that I think we've got bed bugs, and they come down and immediately start spraying, that's not good protocol. They in fact need to inspect and look for the bugs. So I mentioned human health effects, and occasionally somebody is exposed to too much of the pesticide while it's being applied, and they can have bad reactions, including headaches, dizziness, nausea, possibly vomiting, and in really bad cases, comas, convulsions, or death, but that is extremely unusual, especially in residential spraying. In agriculture, things happen sometimes, but mostly that doesn't happen. And that's, of course, pesticide poisoning or acute exposure. What we're concerned about is the chronic exposure that results from the use of pesticides over time and the residues of those pesticides that build up. And this is a problem because once most pesticides dry, they have little activity against the pest. However, they don't actually go away, and they accumulate in the environment over time. And in New York and in Boston, studies done in public housing show that every apartment tested contained residues, anywhere from 1 to 12 residues of different pesticides, with an average of about 4. And some of those in pesticides were, in fact, 30 years old. So we don't know what the human health effects of particularly raising a child in these kinds of apartments is, but we do know that individual pesticides can have the health effects that are listed here, including corruption of our hormones. Some pesticides have been linked to cancers. Pesticides have been linked to both birth defects and to the cause of permanent mutations, meaning that not only is there a possibility of children being born with birth defects, but in fact, their genome has been changed so that they will pass those defects on to future generations. There have also been reproductive effects associated with pesticides and broader environmental concerns. And overall, there are concerns about the indoor air quality from pesticides, many of which are also may contain other substances such as propellants, which may be active as well, and all of which may irritate people with allergies or with asthma. I mentioned resistance in bugs. Bedbug insect resistance is common. It tends to develop in populations that are treated with insecticide over time, but bedbugs are especially good at it. They have over a dozen different genetic mechanisms and can develop resistance to a chemical in as little as 3 generations, which can be as little as a single year. For instance, when DDT was first developed and released in the late 40s, it was extraordinarily good for eliminating bed bugs. However, within 2 years, resistance was being reported, and by 1957, it was considered useless against bed bugs. We then proceeded to use every major pesticide that's ever been developed, including things like malathion, diazinon, chloridane, and they developed resistance to those and to everything else we've ever used. And right now they're busy developing resistance to neonicotinoids, which were widely used for a number of years with some success, but that's going to change very quickly. So I mentioned resistance to pyrethroids. Most of these are the pesticides that you'll see that end in thrin, like pyrethrin, deltamethrin. If its name ends with thrin, the bug is probably already resistant to it. So everybody says don't rely on pesticides alone. HUD says don't rely on pesticides. The EPA says don't rely on pesticides. Centers for Disease Control says don't rely on pesticides. Even the National Pest Management Association says don't rely on pesticides alone, because they're simply not reliable. And there's another issue here to resistance, which is that we rely on pesticides for public health emergencies, for instance, after natural disasters. And if all the bugs are resistant to all our pesticides, what are we going to do? This is very similar to the problems that we're seeing with antibiotic resistance, where overprescription and overuse of antibiotics and inappropriate use of antibiotics, such as in animal feeding, leads to the development of resistance and of what are called superbugs that can cause infections and that can be very, very, very difficult to treat. And when our antibiotics no longer work, what are we going to do? So we need our antibiotics. We want to be able to preserve pesticides for use when we need them. So our best approach is to use multiple tactics, including those recommended by integrated pest management, which I'm going to talk about in this minute. And if you are using pesticides, it is important to remember to rotate chemical classes, to not use the same pesticide over and over and over, and to not continue to be using pyrethroids. And if you have a pesticide or a pest control company that doesn't understand what you're talking about when you ask them to continue to rotate classes, you need a better pest control. So it's going to take a minimum of 30 days to gain control from the point that you realize that there is a pesticide or a pet bug infestation going on. Our eggs are going to take 6 to 10 days to hatch. It takes at least 30 days until the bugs mature. And for the first 2 months, there are very, very few adults. The bugs are very small, and their feeding activity is very low level. And so most people are not even going to realize that they have a problem. It takes me, I figure, probably 3 months or more before after people have actually been infested, before they realize it. And about half of the people actually do not realize that they have bed bugs. So once you realize that you've got bugs, you call somebody out, they inspect, they treat. 10 days, they need to come back to reinspect 10 to 21 days after initial treatment. This is very important because bed bug eggs will hatch out in 6 to 10 days. So usually reinspection is 14 days after initial treatment, and there may need to be retreatment at that time, and then second reinspection should be scheduled for another 14 days out. Industry average is 3 treatments until control is achieved, but it may take longer than that. So if you figure this out, 3 visits, 10 days spacing, we're talking about at least 30 days. There is no such thing as overnight bed bug control. And if anybody is trying to sell you that they can come in and with 1 treatment totally eliminate bed bugs, they're scamming you. So it's important to create bed bug literacy as part of our early detection. You need to provide information to occupants and staff and be honest and say, we have had bed bugs in this building in the past. We have treated them. We will continue to treat them, and we need for you to report to us when you have bed bug issues. Trying to pretend that there are not bed bugs and that no treatments are occurring because none are needed isn't going to work, because tenants see what's going on, they talk to each other, and if management is denying there's a problem, tenants are going to figure that out, and then all your trust is gone, and you're never going to be able to work well. We highly recommend the use of interceptors. Here you can see the climb up, that white thing on the left side of the partition there. These are usually, of course, placed under the legs of beds. They can be placed elsewhere and used as monitors. The volcanoes that I showed you earlier can also be used in these kinds of situations. All maintenance staff and janitorial staff should be trained in bed bug identification and simple inspection. You guys are the people that are in the homes, looking around, fixing things, doing things, poking your head into places where where even the residents might not go very often. You're also in mechanical spaces and other places which most people don't go into. We would recommend inspecting multifamily housing periodically, at least all apartments at least once a year. And apartments that have had bed bug infestations, you may want to inspect quarterly. And in places that have ongoing infestations, we would recommend inspection every 2 weeks, including retreatment, but then continuing to inspect every 2 weeks until no treatment, until no bugs are observed for at least 6 weeks. At that time, if no bugs have been observed or caught by within 6 weeks, you can declare the bugs eradicated. And now let's talk more about what is actually effective in terms of treatment. So this is the Centers for Disease Control and the Environmental Protection Agency issued a joint statement on bed bugs several years ago, in which they say explicitly that they promote integrated pest management for bed bug control as an effective pest control method that uses information on the life cycle of the pest and incorporates non-chemical and chemical methods, including heat, vacuuming, steaming, laundering, and possibly disposing of infested items. The obvious control issues with bed bugs are, first of all, their size. They are just really small. That first instar bug, the first nymph that comes out of that egg, is about the size of a poppy seed and translucent, and it's really, really, really hard to see. But as they grow, they get big enough to see easily. An adult bed bug unfed is going to be about the size of a poppy seed, or I'm sorry, a sesame seed, and fully fed, it may be as big as an apple seed. The eggs, of course, as I've already said, are very hard to spot. They look like little bits of white thread. And of course, the bed bugs are cryptic. That means they hide. They usually only come out to feed, which may be only once or twice a week for 5 or 10 minutes. They do, however, move around quite a bit inside their harborages, inside our walls. They follow our utility chases, our wiring, our plumbing, our ducting and cabling to move from unit to unit. And it turns out that they disperse much more quickly than we thought. And in one experiment that Dr. Wang did, bed bugs dispersed within 2 weeks from a single apartment to all adjacent apartments, including across the public hallway. That egg-laying behavior that we mentioned is annoying. They lay eggs frequently, sometimes even just while they're walking around, or into cracks and crevices, or into aggregation areas. And those eggs are sticky. They are hard to dislodge. They are hard, for instance, to vacuum up, and they may get stuck inside of vacuum hoses and places like that. And because they only feed occasionally, they are seldom seen, and it may be a while before people catch on that there are bugs hiding somewhere. They can survive for a long time unfed. Older information suggested a year or more. More recent experiments work in labs has shown that adults can survive unfed for several months, at least 3, 4, and under certain conditions, maybe as long as up to 5 months. So when we talk about early detection, we are going to rely a lot on our monitors, both the volcanoes up top and the climb-ups down below. There are other brands of monitors similar to the climb-up, but this was the first, and it still remains one of the most widely used, partly because it is also extremely inexpensive. So exclusion of bed bugs, first of all, again, we want people to be aware of the problem and aware of the risk of bringing home used furniture, for instance. Caulking and sealing all cracks and crevices, for instance, between baseboards and the wall, or baseboards and the floor, around shelving, cabinets, inside of closets where shelves or clothes rails may be mounted. All those are good things to seal. And of course, as I mentioned before, we would recommend a periodic inspection of the entire building. For preparation, we would recommend clutter elimination in the long term, or at least clutter containment. Again, plastic tubs are excellent. People have a lot of stuff. They can move it into the plastic tubs, which are going to be stacked. These are easy to move for cleaning, inspection, or treatment. And the residents can see what's in the tubs, so they can actually find and use their stuff. And if there's bug activity uh, in any of the stuff, that will become evident in that tub. You will see bugs, you will see their feces or other signs of the bug, and that tub can then be treated. So if we containerize people's stuff in the tubs, we don't necessarily need to treat all of everybody's stuff. We can determine what is actually infested and treat that. In order for effective treatment, we need to be able to see and possibly treat baseboards and corners. And so we would like to be able to see those. And for trapping, we would use climb-ups or volcanoes. And while their primary purpose is monitoring, it turns out they can also be very effective for prevention and control. If you don't have bed bugs, you want to still have monitors, and we would recommend staff having monitors at home because of the possible risk of bringing bed bugs home with you. And Dr. Wang's research has shown that monitors will prevent introduced bugs from being able to access the host, that would be us in bed, and being unable to successfully feed and survive. So even if you do manage to bring home one or two bugs from your residents' homes, if you have monitors properly installed on your bed, the chance of that introduction becoming an infestation becomes much, much, much lower. So when we talk about integrated pest management, we often talk about treatments and talk about a pyramid of tactics. And so here we have the IPM pyramid for bed bugs. And like the old food pyramid, we like to put the bulk of our work down at the base of the pyramid, which is building maintenance, repair, and renovate and design features and renovation. And so that would involve proper maintenance and repair, especially sealing of cracks and crevices, as I mentioned earlier, decluttering, keeping things washed and vacuumed so that you can see any evidence of infestation. Mechanical trapping for bed bugs involves the use of various kinds of traps or climb-ups or those volcanoes. Physical treatments for bed bugs are remarkably effective. Heat is our gold standard because heat kills all bugs at all life stages, including the eggs. And so heat in its various forms, including steam, is an extremely effective tool against bed bugs. We can also vacuum them up. And in fact, that's the simplest way to get rid of any bug that you don't like. And so if you pull sheets back and discover aggregations of bed bugs around that bed, around the mattress, you can grab your vacuum cleaner and suck those bugs up. It is very, very satisfying as well as effective. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have our chemicals. And most of the chemicals that we would recommend for use in treating for bed bugs are going to be various pesticidal dusts, such as diatomaceous earth or silica gels, which are a industrial form of silica, which is actually the same thing that diatomaceous earth is. It's just whereas diatomaceous earth is dug out of the ground, is mined, silica gels are manufactured. And in fact, silica gels can be more effective than diatomaceous earth. But all these dusts are not for surface treatment. They are all respiratory hazards. They're very fine powders that we don't want to breathe. So they're used into cracks and crevices or into voids, such as behind electrical switch covers and places like that. Oh, I should also point out here that as we move, you'll see it on the left side of this diagram, as we move from prevention to intervention, we also are increasing the possible toxicity of the work that we are doing, which means that we are exposing our residents and their children to higher levels of risk. And so as we want to continually try to drive ourselves down the pyramid, so as we eliminate an infestation, we're going to then step up things like trapping and monitoring so that we prevent a recurrence and don't have to use things like pesticides as much in the future. And in fact, if pesticides should be applied only by licensed pest management professionals, especially sprays. Over-the-counter sprays that people buy at the grocery store or Home Depot are simply not going to be effective, and foggers are completely ineffective. There's been several research studies showing that simple total release foggers or bug bombs simply neither reach the harborages for bed bugs nor kill them effectively. And so foggers should never be used. And we would, in fact, encourage lease amendments that do not allow do-it-yourself pest treatment. Residents should be encouraged instead to report to management, who will have professional treatment applied. So we've already mentioned using sealing cracks and crevices. We would recommend silicone caulks, which are, although they're higher cost, are more effective. They don't dry out, they're waterproof and heat resistant, and so they can be used anywheres, and they will save enormous labor costs. Special surfaces and outdoor treatments may require careful sealant choices. If you have questions about that, you can ask Susanna or I, and we can help you with those choices. I mentioned vacuuming. This is in the photograph here. We have a pest control vacuum that has a HEPA filter in it. These are specially designed to suck up bugs, and they reduce the risk of the vacuum becoming infested itself. And they also, the HEPA filter prevents any allergens from being blown out the back end. So they are very effective to remove large aggregations and clean up debris. However, we cannot guarantee that they will eliminate bed bugs, especially because the eggs are sticky. And you need to make sure that if you're using any vacuum you're using, you dispose of the bag immediately. And you may need to figure out how to clean out your vacuum. Thermal treatments, as I said, are extremely effective. That may involve freezing, steamers, and you see some commercial steamers there on the right. And dry heat are all very beneficial. Again, heat kills all bugs at all life stages, including the eggs. It's much less hazardous than other methods and may have a shorter treatment time. However, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to bring the heat up quickly to kill the bugs properly. And if you don't, insulated areas may allow the bugs to survive, or if you're not working fast enough, it may allow the bugs to disperse ahead of you. So some companies use carbon dioxide snow, which comes out of the tank at about minus 112 degrees Fahrenheit, and it freezes the bugs and their eggs on contact, which is excellent. The only problem is it actually has to contact the bug directly, and a single bed sheet or sheet of paper will insulate the bugs and allow their survival. However, that snow vaporizes and turns to a gas with no liquid phase, which means that there's no mess, and this is actually very helpful around electronic equipment, for instance. And so different tools have different uses. Not every tool is going to be effective in every case, but they all have their uses in different conditions. Freezing can also be good for infested papers. For instance, if file rooms or libraries get infested, those books or papers can be packed into plastic-lined cardboard boxes, sealed and sent to commercial cold storage for a month, and that will eliminate both the bugs and their eggs. Steam is excellent, and there is no license needed because there is no pesticide needed. And so you can get a steamer and you can use it on furniture, couches, carpets, floors, just about anything you may want to test for staining or heat, heat sensitivity. But it's very easy to use. You want to be careful though, because high pressure will blow the bugs, which you don't want to do. And if you have too much moisture, you may end up with mold growth. So you want to have low pressure, low vapor, and a wide steam head so that you can get those bugs easily. The trick with the steamer is you have to move slowly because you have to cook the bug or hard boil the egg. So it's 15 seconds a foot or 4 feet a minute as you move with the steamer. There are a number of hot boxes that are available, ranging in size from things that you can put, say, a suitcase inside to these larger tents that are now available. These are great. They come in a couple of duffel bags. They're highly transportable, easy to erect, for instance, inside a living room or inside of an office. And you simply rack people's belongings in there, plug them into the wall current. They come complete with electronic temperature controls. And so after 2 to 4 hours, you have sterilized everything that's inside of them. You can put an entire couch in there. You can put recliners or power chairs inside and cook them up, and it's highly effective. Again, heat kills all bugs at all life stages, including the eggs. And so this particular one that we're showing is one that was made by a company called ZapBug. And I did some work with a housing provider here in Philadelphia who has 9 buildings, 1,500 apartments, and for years have had persistent bed bug infestations. And after training, the gentleman in the center there, who was on their maintenance staff, went and got his pesticide applicator's license, and they bought themselves a ZapBug tent, and they proceeded to treat all of their infestations, and they eliminated them. And that was 3 years ago, and they have not had a bed bug problem since. If there are any introductions, they're reported, and they simply eliminate them immediately. So they are very happy with the training and their ZapBug tent there. Here are other kinds of room heating units. These are the type that are often used, for instance, by hotels. This is professional equipment only. It's 220 volts, so it can be difficult and expensive to operate, and you need to know what you're doing so that you actually kill the bugs effectively and don't allow survivors. Chemical controls are some pesticide use will probably be required, and again, we would recommend primarily dusts, either diatomaceous earth or some sort of silica gel. And these are not going to affect the eggs, mind you, but they do affect the nymphs and adults. If you are using liquid pesticides, or your pest control company is using liquid pesticides, we would recommend one that had two active ingredients rather than just one. And again, rotate the class. Don't keep using the same pesticide over and over again. As I mentioned earlier, most pesticides have little or no residual activity, which is a problem. However, there is a new pesticide which was developed by Penn State, not by me or my group, but by some of my colleagues. It's called Apprehend, and it is a biopesticide that is non-toxic to mammals. It is actually fungal spores that are sprayed to create a barrier. And so, for instance, are on above baseboards and around the box spring and on the bed frame of the bed. So that as bed bugs crawl across it, these spores attach to the bed bug, and as they aggregate and hang out with each other, they spread the spores to each other, and then the spores infect the bugs and kill them in 3 to 5 days individually. In a lab, it wipes out a colony in about 10 days. In the field, it seems to be about 3 weeks. And this, the Apprehend continues to have a residual activity for up to 3 months. And that strange photograph there, that's actually a lint sheet. And I went back to a site where I had applied Apprehend 2 weeks earlier, and I collected dead bugs. I simply rolled the lint sheet over them. And then you bring it, and you can see on the, particularly in the bottom right there, there are some adults, and higher up there are some nymphs. And what you do is you put that sheet with the bugs in a Tupperware container with a damp paper towel for 4 days, and the fungus outgrows. That the fungus that's infecting the bugs actually grows in that high humidity, and you can see, for instance, that on the next to those two bugs on the lower right, there is one that is totally white and fuzzy. That is an infected bug. And there are others on the left, and further up in the slide you can see all white and fuzzy. That means the fungus killed these bugs, and that the fungus is present and will continue killing bugs for up to 3 months. I must say I've become quite attached to this product. There are treatment protocols for chemical treatment for bed bugs. National Pest Management Association has some. They also have an online training. There is Bedbug Central has protocol suggestions, and Denny Miller also has some protocols, pesticide suggestions. There's a number of things that we do not recommend. As Susanna said, spraying rubbing alcohol is very dangerous. It's highly flammable. When you mix it with air in a sprayer, that cloud of atomized alcohol is highly flammable and can be ignited by anything. A cigarette, incense, flame, open flame, candle flame, sparking of caused by refrigerator cycling on, you name it, it will ignite and cause a fireball. There was a woman in Detroit 2 years ago who burned down the 42-unit apartment building she was living in. While we recommend using insect repellent while you're working, insect repellent will not prevent a hungry bed bug from biting you. So spraying your bed with insect repellent or your baby's crib is not effective. Abandoning the area is not going to work. Bed bugs will simply outweight you. Turning up the heat, your house heat is not going to get up to over 120 degrees. That's not going to work. Leaving lights on isn't going to work. The bugs will get used to it. We don't, as we said, don't recommend discarding old furniture and buying new, because bugs will simply infest your new furniture. On the internet, you'll see they suggest putting things in black plastic bags and placing them out in the hot summer sun to kill the bugs. That's not going to work, because the bottom of the bag on the ground is going to be cool and bed bugs will survive. Just using insecticide is not going to kill all your bugs. Just vacuuming only is not going to kill all your bugs. Finally, there is this product that's illustrated in the photo here. They're called Nuvan or Vapona strips. These are impregnated with an organophosphate pesticide that is a neurotoxin that is highly dangerous and it is not labeled for use in inhabited space. It was designed to be used in attics, in storage sheds and barns, not in buildings that people are living in. They have gotten a label exemption for use on bed bugs that involves using pieces of a strip in garbage bags for 2 weeks at a time to kill bugs and eggs. Denny Miller at Virginia Tech has shown that there is extensive survival from this, and that's not an effective technique. And in fact, when you open up those bags, you have an extreme exposure to the pesticide, and we really do not recommend this, and you should not allow a pesticide applicator to use Nuvan in any kind of public housing. Finally, if you need information on pesticides, you can look it up on the National Pesticide Information Center website. And if you, staff, or residents are exposed to pesticides, please call your Poison Control Center at 1-800-222-1222 rather than 911. The Poison Control Center can give you immediate aid, and they clear 95% of their calls over the phone, so you don't need to go to hospitals. And that's it for me. Thank you, and if you have questions, we'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Diane. I'm going to take the controls back and see if anyone put anything in the chat box. If you haven't figured out where the chat is, you can, yeah, nobody has. If you can figure out how to unmute yourself, we can take questions that way. Or if you slide your mouse over your controls on the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, the controls should appear. You might see the chat box. And someone unmuted themselves, so I'm going to stop talking and let somebody else take give us their question.
Susanna, this is Ken Strong. I wanted to ask you and Diane, excellent presentation, by the way. Once again, thank you so much. I wanted you to speak, if you know, to the state of landlord-tenant law as it relates to bed bugs.
Well, there's different laws in every municipality. There's no statewide laws, but a few cities, I know Diane probably knows a little bit more about what's going on in Philadelphia, but in Philadelphia, the landlord is on the hook. And it really is by city by city. Diane might have more to say, but I will say in cases where I'm not working in public housing, if people are having issues, I've had luck having them talk to the local code enforcer to get landlords to take some action. And do you know? Oh, and there might be a list of laws, existing laws on
There is.
the National Pesticide.
No. National Pest
No.
Management Association does have a list of laws relating to bed bugs, and they've recently updated it, and that's available on the website, or I can send it to you if you email me to remind you.
Okay.
In general, public housing is responsible for pest control, including that of bed bugs, and HUD expects you to be responsible for that. Beyond public housing, as Susanna said, it does vary, although most states have adopted federal model legislation called ULTRA, Universal Landlord Tenant Rights Act, and under ULTRA, and I'm not sure if Maryland is an ULTRA state, Pennsylvania actually is not, but under ULTRA, again, landlords are responsible for pest control in most cases, especially in multifamily housing. If it's a standalone rental of a house or a row home, then the landlord may not be responsible. It depends on how the lease is written. But in most multifamily, yeah.
We got a question on the chat box. I'm going to read real quick. What do you recommend for people who are told to bag their clothes up and wash and dry them? After they wash them and bring them back into the residences, are they re-exposing themselves? Because normally a bed bug treatment is happening more than once. Well, hopefully they get.
The answer is yes.
Yeah. Hopefully they get thorough instructions, and the only way to avoid re-exposing themselves is to basically live out of bags or plastic containers, and keeping things that are washed and that you're not using frequently completely sealed in bags until the treatment is over, and then organizing your stuff so things that you use more frequently are in a bag that you would open and close as needed. But there is a lot of laundry involved. So after wearing stuff and you put it in the hamper, you know that it could be exposed, and you just have to keep up with the laundry. And the bedding, of course, is going to get exposed. But if you're undergoing treatment, every bug is going to go towards the bed, and a good treatment is going to address those bugs coming from elsewhere in the apartment, in the home, towards the host, and they will get exposed to the pesticides. And
Yeah,
heat
that's why
treatments, you have to spread the clothes out, actually, in order for the heat to penetrate the clothing.
So this is exactly why we recommend monitors and encasements on beds, is so that the bed becomes a safe haven even during treatment, because the bugs will try to be getting to the host, and so if there's monitors and encasements, they're going to be unsuccessful in that. I really feel that that it's unrealistic to expect people to live out of garbage bags. You can't see what's in them. They are difficult to seal, difficult to unseal without destroying the bag. And once you've ripped them, they're now useless. So I would really recommend using the plastic totes rather than garbage bags, except for things that are maybe out of season clothes that you're not going to need to access for some time.
What you should really be concerned with is preparation instructions that tell you to bag up everything and do nothing with it, because I very often see that they say take every rug, curtain, every piece of fabric, including your clothes, and bag it up during treatment. But it doesn't give you instructions on, oh, well, this needs to be washed. So be careful of those preparation instructions. If they're asking too much, they're probably asking too much.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We take complaints too.
Okay, what do you recommend in terms of mattress covers and the Active Guard chemically treated box spring covers?
Diane, you want to take that?
Okay, so mattress encasements are extremely effective in excluding bed bugs from mattresses and box springs and should be part of standard treatment. And HUD has said that HUD funding may be used to procure the encasements. Encasements need to be fitted to the individual bed, which is kind of a nuisance because beds come in all sorts of sizes.
Right.
But it's important that the cover fits snugly. Otherwise, it's going to create more harborage areas where bed bugs could be hanging out. I personally am not a big fan of the Active Guard. It is a pesticidal treatment. It is a pyrethrin, and we know that 80 to 95% of the bugs are resistant to pyrethroids. So I really don't see why we should be introducing pesticides that are probably going to be ineffective and are only going to result in exposures to the people living in the space. So I personally would not recommend use of the Active Guards.
But if they were donated, use them on the box springs as
Yeah.
opposed to the mattresses.
Yeah, if you were going to use them, I would use them on the box spring.
I know a lot of people don't like the plastic ones, but I got these hardcore vinyl ones, very cheap, like $12. They're called Dry Defenders. They're sitting on my desk because I'm going on a home visit later. But I don't know if you'd see them. But often, like, if you can splurge on an actual fabric one, do that. The plastic and ones will break, but this vinyl is super heavy and it was really cheap. So I figured better than nothing to get something on a bed if you possibly can to save a mattress and a spring.
The companies that make them will work with you and give you discounts on volume purchasing. There's a couple of companies, for instance, that specialize in working with hotels, hospitality industry, and they have good pricing and they're willing to work with you on quantities and a mix of sizes. And I can give you some information on those companies if you're interested.
I think Mattress Safe has a charitable giving discounted program too. I'll look that up.
New Jersey Hospitality is eager to work with people on this issue. So yeah, you can contact us and we can give you specific suggestions if you don't know them already.
Okay, how about bed bugs and if you have pets, cats, dogs, do the bed bugs, are your pets potential hosts for bed bugs?
They can be. They're not a preferred host. If you think about the shape of a flea and the shape of a bed bug, they're designed very differently. Fleas are designed to get through fur. Bed bugs are not. If dogs get bit, it's going to be on that naked part of their belly. A hungry bed bug will feed on a pet, especially birds. But their preferred host is humans, so focus on the humans.
Yeah, it's fairly unusual. And cats and dogs are not really at much risk, whereas the humans, of course, are.
But pet bedding should be addressed because they like that, fabric.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to know, and doing inspections every day where you go in houses that you're not aware that they may have bed bugs or something to that nature, is there a spray or something that you could recommend that could possibly deter them, at least for the time frame that we are in there doing an inspection?
Yeah,
go ahead, Diane.
Okay, so there's two things. One is we would recommend you put on booties and explain to the resident that you are in and out of different people's homes all the time, every day, and you don't want to be spreading nothing from anybody to anybody. And residents will understand that, and they will appreciate it. Second, we would recommend that you use a regular insect repellent like Off, and just spray your ankles and those booties, and where your booties meet your pants. I would also recommend spraying your cuffs, perhaps. But and regular insect repellent is all you need. Alcohol is not effective. It is not a repellent, and as soon as it dries, it's gone.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Well, if there are questions going forward, you can see my email and phone number and Diane's email are on the screen. Take those down and visit stoppest.org for resources and more information. If you want more information on bed bugs, we have several other recorded webinars that go into a little more detail on treatment options. But yeah, stay in touch and know that we are here to answer questions in the future.
Susanna and Diane, on behalf of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City, thank you so much for this afternoon and for last Friday afternoon. What you've produced for us in these webinars is going to have a rippling effect through our training division and is something that has been responsive to staff concerns and worries about bed bugs. And you've given us the real scoop on it and some very practical things that we can do to protect ourselves. So you've done us a great service, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This will be recorded, and you can share it with other colleagues if it's if people have concerns. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the show, but thank you so much for joining us today and hanging with us through this presentation. Great weekend.
Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.